As soon as you give politicians power, any kind of power that didn't exist previously, if they can figure out a way to force you into carrying something that lets you enter businesses or lets you do this or lets businesses open, historically, they are not going to give that power up. They find new reasons to use it. We have to protect those freedoms at all costs, whether you agree with people's choices or not, because it is the foundation that this country was founded on. Freedom. This idea of freedom, there's so many people that think it's frivolous, it's not important, it's not the main thing that we should be focused on, but it is the literal structure that allows this country to be so f***ing amazing. Every single country that's ever existed other than the United States, up until 1776, every country that has ever existed was run by dictators, all of them. This is the first experiment in self-government that actually worked, and it created the greatest superpower the world's ever known. It created the greatest cultural machine, the greatest machine of art and creativity and innovation right in here. And how did it do that? It did it through freedom. And as soon as you see something, anything that comes along and inhibits your freedom, you should be very cautious of that thing. You should be very suspicious, because anything that comes along that can inhibit your freedom is, by definition, anti-American.
That intro gives me chills every single time, guys. Welcome to the show, The Bold-Faced Truth. I'm David Medina. I am so excited about this particular show because we have someone very special in studio with us today. Oregon hasn't seen a governor since 1987 when Vic Atia left office, and since then we've seen nothing but Democrats in the Oregon's highest office, and things haven't gotten better. They seem to get worse every cycle. I don't know if you guys saw this. The OPB poll that came out recently is showing that Oregonians are fed up with this. The OPB, they partnered with some organization in Portland to survey 600 people. If we go to the slide here, you'll see that of those 600 people, 9% had a positive, very positive outlook on Governor Brown. 60%, and this is OPB. This is not your conservative. This is like the same people that were letting off the rioters off the hook in the riots of 2020 that called them protesters. The same OPB that usually tends to lean non-conservative friendly. 60% on this survey view Governor Brown in a very negative light. Let's go to President Joe Biden in that same poll. 12% have a very positive outlook on President Joe Biden. And 53% have a very negative outlook. I don't know about you guys, but that, being a conservative and a Republican in Oregon and paying attention to politics since the Bush years and having to go through 2 terms of Obama, that gives me a lot of hope. And that really, that makes me happy. It's like we need new leadership in Oregon. We need somebody to go in there and not just pass an agenda that puts the Oregon people first, but someone that can also bring people together as well. And Governor Brown and Governor Kitzhaber and the scandal that ended his term in office. I mean, we've just had some terrible leaders here in Oregon, and it's not getting us anywhere, folks. And so can this be the year that a Republican governor retakes Oregon's highest office? So back in 2018, I don't know if you guys remember, back in 2018, Kate Brown beat Newt Buehler by 7 points in the general election, and then before that, she beat Dr. Bud Pierce by the same margin in 2016. So that gap is usually in politics 7 points. That's usually anything over that is like almost like it's like considered a blowout. So we're not too far off, and yes, we've lost a lot of people to Idaho and to other states, but you know what? This poll, this OPB poll, and other polls we've seen shows that Oregon, not just Republicans, but libertarians, Democrats, are tired of the direction of the state. And so we invited a special person in Bridget Barton. She's in studio with us. Before we go to Bridget, I want to just play her most recent ad that came out that got me fired up. And it just, I don't know, it got me fired up. So let's go to the display real quick and let's play that before we bring Bridget in.
Crushing inflation, crime, dysfunctional elections, indoctrination in failing schools. Don't waste your vote on the same tired faces or weak career politicians. I've never been afraid to do hard things. I'll suspend gas taxes, ban CRT, and back the blue. I'm Bridget Barton. I've got a message for the career politicians. The people want their power back. I'm coming.
Paid for by Bridget Barton for
I love that last. I'm coming. You know, the people want their power back. We want we just want to, you know, a lot of us, it's not just the power too. It's just, we just want to be able to live our lives.
If you're thinking about buying solar panels,
the YouTube ad decided to come on without me accepting it. That's just a big tech messing with us probably. But it is my honor to introduce to the audience, Bridget Barton. Bridget, thank you so much for being in studio with us, and thank you for running for office. I know it's probably been stressful. You just told me earlier how, I mean, you're on day like 100 straight of like events and being around people, and I can't even be around people for more than 4 days straight. So the fact that you're working your butt up, you're running a great campaign, by the way.
Thank you.
A lot of good people are running, a lot of good candidates are running great campaigns, but you know, Bridget, you're just sticking to yourself. You're being real. You're being genuine, and that's exactly what people want in politicians or in elected leaders. And so, tell us a little bit about yourself. When was the moment you decided that you're going to run for this, and that you, you know, I know you have a husband, Jim, right?
Bridget, I'm sorry, Curtis.
Curtis.
Yeah, Jim is my business partner.
Gotcha.
My husband's Curtis.
So when did you and Curtis decide, you know what, we need to take a shot at this?
Well, first of all, I want to just say, you know, being myself, it's really all I know how to do. So I'm kind of going to stick to that. We started thinking about this in late spring or mid-spring a year ago. And my husband and I did talk about it after I was actually approached by other people to run. And I kind of took the idea, thought about it, and went home, discussed it. And we actually, we have 2 adult children. We had discussed it with them as well, because we thought, you know, it's going to be a tough race in the general election. And then those first 4 years as governor, those are going to be tough years. And I wanted them to know what they were getting into and make sure they were ready for it. So everybody signed off. And my husband, I have to say, when I was approached and asked what I thought of the idea of running, I was surprised. But when I went home and said to my husband, there's some people who think I should run for governor, and I'm giving it some serious thought, his answer was, "It's about time." That's what he said. And I was so surprised. I said, "Is that really what you think?" And he said, "Yeah, I do. You've been working kind of behind the scenes for the last 30 years, and you have a lot to offer. You have a lot that you've worked on, and these are your issues. And, you know, frankly, that's why I'm running, because these are my issues. I've been working on them for the last 30 years, and here they are all. The left has just pushed and pushed and pushed, and they've created such a mess of our state to the point where when I go around the state, people are just like, what happened in this last 10 years in particular? What happened? And what happened is the state got completely out of balance with all Democrats in power. And I love your intro. It gave me chills too, because it talks about what happens when power becomes consolidated, and it's never good. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle it is either. I'll just say that right out. Yeah. When you consolidate too much power and it gets out of control. And I love the point that was made in there, is that no one ever gives up power voluntarily. And it's always a tough fight. And it's time for that tough fight. And I think everyone in Oregon knows it. It's time to start. That's why I close by saying, you know, people want their power back. They want their freedom back. Yeah.
So you've never ran for office before. This is your first time.
Actually, it is not.
Okay.
So way back when I first kind of transitioned out of, we can talk more about my kind of early life and career, but when I kind of got back to my real calling, which, you know, was more, I actually graduated from college with a degree in philosophy, and it was political philosophy, and I had a teaching certificate in government, a secondary level. So when I transitioned back to that, I did get interested at first and thought maybe I would run. And in 1992, I ran. That was the Perot year, if you remember. And I ran as an independent. Oh, you don't remember that?
Yeah, I was 3.
And I was challenging in my district. It was for state rep in my district, a real rhino. I mean, a real rhino, very establishment.
Yeah.
And so I ran on sort of the Perot independent ticket, and of course got crushed. Coming in not kind of naive. I was young, and then again in '96, I thought, by then I was a Republican. I'd registered Republican. I realized I'm a Republican. I mean, the Perot thing was kind of an aberration and for everyone.
Were there certain issues or values that where you said, yes, I'm Republican? What were the big issues back then that were important to you?
Free markets, freedom, period. I felt that they were failing in the schools, that the public employee unions were already starting to destroy the schools. I was a big charter school advocate, which was definitely coming in, on the Republican reform side. But yeah, just right down the line. I mean, I'm pro-life. I was then. I always have been. I've always supported the Second Amendment. I mean, I'm a constitutionalist, really.
Yeah.
So it was very easy for me. If you weren't around for the Perot years, it was sort of a challenge to the establishment Republicans that weren't getting the job done. So Perot came in and said, I can do better than this. And a lot of people kind of peeled off just for that moment in time.
Yeah.
But I immediately re-registered Republican, ran in '96 to try to take this rhino out. I came really close to beating him, even though he was a several-term incumbent. And then after that race, I had run into my business partner, Jim, and we decided that the most important thing we could offer for the state of Oregon was to raise up conservative ideas and develop a voice for conservative ideas.
Yeah.
So in 1997, we started the magazine. And if you go back in time to 97 and look at what was going on, Lars Larson had, I think,
Who endorsed you?
Yes, he did.
That's huge.
It's huge. It's changed the race. But he had just gotten started. And Fox News, I think, started in '96. And so they were just kind of a fledgling channel. The Oregonian was starting to go hard left. And so there was no conservative media in the state. So a number of the big private businesses around the state gathered and were willing to support this idea of having a conservative voice out there in the media. So that was a lot of fun. We did that. We're still doing it to this day in a different format online, like so many things have gone virtual and stuff.
A little bit different issues we're dealing with today than what you were probably dealing with in the 90s.
Yeah.
Did you ever think back then that you would see the day where, a whole political party, attacks our police and defunds them? Did you ever think you would see the day where, the kind of garbage that's being pushed on our kids in our schools today? I mean, did you ever think that it would get that crazy? This crazy?
Never. I think, like a lot of people in Oregon, I would say the same thing. I am constantly stunned by what the left continues to move forward with. And I think, like a lot of people, I think now they must see that they're losing traction with the public, so they'll stop, but they don't.
Yeah.
They just double down, and it just gets worse and worse. That's what's been happening for the last 10 years. And so the combination of that and the condition of the state, and that these sort of fundamental kitchen table issues, no one's dealing with them, not the establishment, right? Or no one's paying attention to the people.
Yeah.
And the people are like, wait a minute, who's going to represent us? Who's going to fix these problems? So my campaign is about staying focused on real problems that affect everyone, and taking it and holding those two Democrats accountable that I'm going to face in the general election, holding them accountable and putting it up right in front of their face and saying, explain yourself. If you're going to defend this, explain yourself. And if you're not going to defend yourself, then get out of the way.
Right.
Because like I say in my ad, I'm coming.
Yeah, and you nailed it perfectly. Actually, you said both Democrats, because I think a lot of people don't understand Betsy Johnson and her and she's very popular. She's received $1 million from Uncle Phil Knight over there at Nike. She's been getting a lot of buzz, and I think she's trying to run as an independent, and people forget that she's a Democrat.
Right.
She's just playing it very smart by breaking from that party and trying to be that uniter. And so I think in the end it hurt. It's just my opinion. I think it hurts the Democrats, especially when no one's excited about Tina Kotek, which just seems to be the front runner.
We have a perfect storm here,
right?
Because she is a candidate. She's banking on old friends and old favors that she's passed out. on her as her years of being on the Ways and Means Committee and kind of passing out favors to some of these big corporate
Right.
donors of hers. Well, now it's time to cash in, and of course, she can't cash in the Democrat primary because the Democrats wouldn't elect her. They're going to go with the progressive left and go with Tina most likely. I think Tobias Reed has a shot, but I can't prognosticate on the Democrats. I don't pay enough attention because I don't want to.
Yeah.
But definitely Senator Johnson looked at her odds and said, I can't win that primary, so I'm going to go right down the middle lane if I can. And a lot of people say independent. She is running as a non-affiliated. There is an independent party in Oregon, and she's not in it. So it's kind of an important distinction. There'll probably be an independent candidate on the ballot, and people are going to be surprised. They're going to be, well, wait a minute, I thought she was an independent. She's
Right.
not.
So you have this amazing story that really captivated me. So one thing that stuck out, and it's just by bad luck to the other candidates because, growing up, I've been around a lot of addiction. I've been around all kinds of addiction. I've had addiction problems myself, and someone that beats addiction, it's not something to be taken lightly. That it's very hard to beat an addiction, especially if it runs in your family. So you have a very special story on beating an addiction of your own. Can you just kind of explain, like, when did that happen? How old were you? What was the reason? What sparked? What triggered the addiction? And what was it? It was alcohol, right?
It was yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm in recovery from alcoholism for 40 years now. It does run in families often, and it does run in my family, both sides of my family, pretty seriously. But oddly, neither of my parents were alcoholic. Now every one of their brothers and sisters just about was, but they, by weird coincidence, were not. And yet I'm sure they sort of had that genetics rolling. And so they never talked to me about that when I was young. We talk more about it now than when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s. People didn't talk about it very much. And certainly my parents didn't because they weren't alcoholic. They knew they had it in their family, but it wasn't discussed very much until it became pretty obvious that their daughter was having a problem. And so I started drinking when I was 14, and I was pretty much round the clock chronic alcoholic when I stopped drinking at 28. Luckily,
When you were 14, was it just how did you get exposed to it? Was it just influences that you were hanging out with, friends? Like how did you start, like, what caused it?
I was just really drawn to it. I can actually, like many alcoholics, I can remember my first drink, and it was at the home of a good friend of mine whose father was alcoholic. Of course, I didn't know it at the time. I know it now as an adult looking back, but he had alcohol everywhere in the home. And I remember going over to her house when I was 14, and parents weren't home, and she just started setting up, I hate to admit this, vodka and grape Kool-Aid. Everyone, like I said, a lot of alcoholics will remember their first drink and their first drunk. And I do remember that. And after that, thinking, wow, that was an interesting experience. I like that, And so I lived in Virginia at the time where the drinking age was 18, and you could get 3-2 beer when you were 18 years old. And I lived in a college town. I lived in Williamsburg, Virginia, and there was easy access to this 3-2 beer everywhere because so many of the college students weren't old enough for other alcohol. So very easy to get fake IDs and hang out with the college students. By the time I was 16, really, I was almost drinking every day. At 16 years old.
Was there, now when you were drinking, do you think it was more fueled by maybe personal issues that you were dealing with in your life, or was it like you were just around the wrong people, or was it a mixture of both?
I don't think it was either one, honestly. I believe I'm responsible for who I chose to be around because I wanted to drink. There's a lot of sort of versions of alcoholism and addiction out there, but many people would say that they just are alcoholic. They're just born that way. That's the way their genetics run. And if you start drinking a bit, you will start to create a life for yourself that leads you down that path. And I did that. I selected my group to be around. Yeah, a lot of them drank like me, but I'm gonna take full responsibility for it. And I did not have particularly bad issues. In fact, in my introductory video that some people have seen, the first thing I say is I was raised in a good family, and I had two a loving family, very nice older brothers, and it was me, you know.
Yeah. So what was so you're 28 when you got clean. What was the turning point? What was the revelation of like, I need to get my stuff together and I need to do something about this? Because there's a lot of people out there who are listening or who are going to listen to this who are battling their own addiction, whether it's alcohol, porn, whatever. And I think a lot of people just, one of the things that I want to pick from your brain is like, what were the first steps? What was the aha moment that you wanted to get clean? And what were the steps that you took after making that decision?
Well, I had been in a number of jobs, and what would happen, I had graduated from college, managed to kind of fumble my way through, and I graduated from a very good university, from William and Mary. And I kept going down in my career path, and then people would push me back up because employers would say, oh, she's got a college degree, she's got leadership ability, she's actually really a very competent person. And so I would get elevated up, and then it would be too much, and I would find a way to get out of it so I didn't have to have that pressure. So I had a kind of a career path like that, and it had led me from Virginia to Los Angeles to Portland, and eventually here things were really getting out of control. It was and in Los Angeles is where things spiraled out of control. And I'll tell you, there was a moment in time in Los Angeles where I was working in a huge restaurant. I was a manager in a big restaurant at Universal Studios. And I was standing there with one of the other managers, and I said, how do you cope with all this stress? And he said, oh, I just snort Coke or get a drink from the bar. And I said, oh, okay, I get it. And I realized, I think that was the moment where I thought, I'm an alcoholic, and I just need to make sure I keep myself medicated. Yeah. And from there, it was a fast spiral downhill, came to Portland, and there was, I was just getting very, very ill. I had had a car accident. I'd broken my leg. I'd broken my arm at a different time. It was always because alcohol fueled. And my parents finally reached out to me, came out here, caught me kind of in the act of being really out of control, and tried to talk to me. They went back home, back east. I was out here alone purposely. I had isolated myself out here, and I had met my husband of now, and he and I knew I wanted to get married. I knew I wanted to have family. I knew I wanted a life. And I called my parents one day, and I said, I think we're gonna get married. And my mom said to me on the phone, you can't get married. You can't have children. You can't have a life until you stop drinking. And I was very angry with them. But when I hung up, I thought, that's it. Yeah. I'm either going to live or I'm going to die. I thought about committing suicide twice after that, and sat in a parking lot one day and thought, do I live? Do I die? And as I've said many times to people, if you've been an addict yourself, that's not such an easy question. Yeah. I mean, sometimes people choose death, and because they can't picture how to live without their drug of choice. Unfortunately, I thought, I'm going to try. I'm going to give it one try. And luckily, there was a treatment center had opened in downtown Portland. It was 1981. It was a brand new idea to have these treatment centers. And I was able to check into that treatment center for 30 days, and I never drank again. That's
amazing, Bridget. I just, it's so inspiring because things that are thrown in front of our eyes these days it just seems like, addiction is almost impossible to beat. And if someone I grew up around alcoholism as well. And I saw how that really holds people down and it keeps people back. I mean, and it's hard to shake. And it's just really inspiring. And also, just to, give you another little boost here. If you can beat that, I mean, there's really nothing you can't do. You can definitely deal with the Democrats.
I can deal with the Democrats.
If you can beat that. So,
I want to add one thing because I think it's so important for people that might be listening that are struggling. It is like jumping off a cliff. And you have to take a leap, and it is absolutely a leap of faith. I would be remiss if I didn't say that my recovery depends on spirituality every single day. It is spiritually based, and it's a hard thing.
Yeah.
It's a hard leap to make, especially when you're, in a lifestyle of drug or alcohol use, but that is the leap you have to make. And it was like jumping off a cliff into blackness. And I jumped and I was caught.
That's amazing. I'm happy for you. And alcoholism is a big problem in the United States. In 2019, 14.5 million people over the ages of 12 on up reported to having alcohol use disorder. And that's growing by the year.
It is.
I mean, it really is. And with social media and just the pull to be successful and to have all the attention on, I mean, there's more pressure on our kids and on the younger generations and even adults today, especially with, living in Biden's America where taxes are going up, gas is going up. Now you have to work even harder, and now your dollar doesn't go as far. And so, I think, like you said, one of the things that ground me and our family is the Lord. And I think that's great. I think it's so important. And we really try to communicate that, because sometimes you just don't have answers for anything, and you don't know what to do. You don't know what the next steps are.
Right.
And you just have to lean on God and trust. So I love that. And good for you. I'm glad that you're, that's such a great story. 14 years in addiction. You turned it around. You built a company. Did you want to talk about your company that you built, a conservative magazine, right?
Sure. We started a conservative magazine back in 97. After I got into recovery, I was able to make a transition, sort of switch my career back to what my college degree was actually in, which was political philosophy. I philosophy major, political science minor, and I was actually a certified teacher in government. And I did that my first year out of college. But I had because of the alcoholism, I was sort of in a decline. Well, in 1991, I kind of flipped my career back and started freelance writing. We talked about, I dabbled a little in politics in 92 and 96, and then decided that, what Oregon was sadly lacking was any conservative media voice. And there were a number of big private companies in the state that could see this, the government was turning anti-business. They'd been through the spotted owl thing, and the forestry problems were really getting intense. And so they wanted this voice, and they supported the magazine, and they some of them still do to this day that are still around. But during the recession, we converted it to an online newsletter magazine. So that's still alive. So it's been 25 years, and we're real proud of our work. We've always been advocates for conservative ideas and for the rural communities, and for working families, for regular people, and for freedom.
That's, and you're exactly right. Oregon needs more of that kind of media, more of that kind of content. And so thank you for starting that, and thank you for your contributions to Oregon. They call you a conservative activist. Is that do you like going by that? Because I saw that. I'm just curious.
I think it's more of an advocate than an activist.
Okay.
I have. It's not like I've been out there marching around or doing anything like that. So it's more. I've been more of a sort of media advocate, really. Mostly media work.
Well, I wanted to clear that up because I think it was the Oregonian or someone that called you a conservative activist, and I was like, that doesn't really sound like
me,
what she was doing.
Anyway,
so I just want to clear that up. So
thanks.
Moving on to Oregon issues. So if you show the Oregon graphs, Sav, if you can show the graphs, OPB did another poll of random Oregonians and asked them what issues matter most to them. And as you can see on the graph here from that survey, homelessness at 22% looks like the big issue. Government leadership, safety, crime, lack of police comes in at third. Politics, partisanship, and then you have jobs, economy, and then down the list, drug addiction, all the way down. It really surprised me that masks and COVID mandates are like people didn't respond more to that. Maybe it was just a, interest. I don't know. I would like to see the sample size they took from that, because I would think that would be a little bit bigger, especially with all the, when all the, excuse me, when all of the COVID mandates were happening. We had tons of nurses and teachers.
People were really up in arms.
Yeah, I mean, they lost their jobs, everything they worked for. I mean, the government told them they're, the same nurses that were saving lives, they all of a sudden turned them into, the enemy, and said that if you don't get vaccinated, you're done. And so I just heard some of the most heartbreaking stories from people, and I'm very surprised that's not a bigger category there. If we go
Me
back
too.
if we go back to the graph, you'll see on the next one. People don't think Oregon's headed in the right direction. They
No, they
they
don't.
they surveyed those same people in that same one, and what was that? 70% said that Oregon is headed in the wrong direction. And let me just remind our audience that this is OPB. OPB hasn't been very conservative friendly. They've been very in a way, in my opinion, biased towards the left and have really led off Democrat leadership, especially in Portland with the riots. So they
I think that's more than fair. You're being more than fair.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So they we're not talking about, the sources. So that's very, it gives me hope. And it's just, it shows you that, like I said, people are fed up. So going on to Oregon issues.
Yeah.
What is your stance on vaccine passports?
Absolute no. Let's just clear the air completely on everything mandate related. I would never employ any mandates on the public. I think I've said this over and over. We're free, intelligent adults in this country. We can make our own decisions about these things. And that applies to masks. It applies to business closures. It applies to vaccines and vaccine passports, the whole gamut. I would have taken much more of the Kristi Noem, Ron DeSantis approach and said people can make their own choices here. If they want to mask up, they can mask up. And the role of government is to provide the best possible information. And what we could have done a lot better job of here in Oregon is providing more hospital beds. All the focus should have been on healthcare, not on trying to tell individuals what to do, and certainly not closing the businesses. And it was the other thing that was so annoying about the mandates is that they were statewide instead of being
Left up to the counties.
Left up to the counties,
Right.
because different counties have completely different situations, in terms of
Something in Harney County might not be, with like 5 people, might not be something with like comparable to
Absolutely.
Multnomah.
Yeah, what was she thinking?
She wasn't.
No,
I don't
she
think
wasn't.
any of them have been thinking. You mentioned the mask. That was kind of my next question. A big issue for me personally
I hated masks.
is the mask. I mean, my daughter missed out on pretty much her entire middle school
Yes.
career because of masks. I couldn't do it. We had a girl in this school district here in my hometown, or where I live now. She testified. She was a senior that had left, that had graduated last year, and she had to go through the mask. And she gave her testimony to the school board, and it was so powerful and it was so heart wrenching because she could barely get through it. She was crying hysterically
Oh,
at what
That's so sad.
what the mask did to her psychologically and her friends. How they had to always worry about if their masks were up or not. They used to like go around teachers, and the trust between them and teachers and the relationships deteriorated because of these masks. They couldn't breathe. They couldn't see each other's facial expressions. I mean, that hasn't been talked about enough. And so a big issue for me was masks. If the CDC comes out, say Bridget Barton becomes our next governor, the CDC comes out and says, in 2022, at the end of the year, or 2023, COVID cases are on the rise, or there's a new variant. We're going to recommend masks for, kids and all that kind of stuff. First of all,
No.
are you going to stand against it? And
Absolutely.
how would you position yourself, your administration, against that?
Absolutely. I would not mandate masks for anyone, ever. Is that clear enough?
That's clear. I mean,
No.
because I asked that because it's hard when you're dealing with such a big beast.
Yes.
When you have the CDC, then you have the Democrat Party, the National Democrat Party, then you have the corporate media, all working together. Go
Right.
ahead.
So, yeah, because one of the problems that, of course, happened was that the federal government stepped in and overrode in some areas on masking and said, no, that's got to be like this. And the posture I would take as governor in that case is that I'm not going to enforce it. I won't enforce federal mandates, and I would never do state mandates. So that kind of lays out where we would be in this state, back to freedom. And, your opening statement, that you have where it talks about that if you give away these small freedoms, that you're never going to get them back. That is so critical. And if we saw Kate Brown right at the end of the mask mandate make them permanent so that she could at any moment snap us back to it.
Right.
And that's that purposeful hanging on to power that you're talking about.
How would you deal with OHA?
Well, first of all, I'm happy. We're here sitting here in Sherwood, but where I'm happy to say that we were able to eliminate Pat Allen from your school board. I'm very proud to say that my company helped with that.
You did
that race, and we took him off the school board where I didn't think he belonged, and neither did the good people of Sherwood. And I would do the same, of course, right away on the Oregon Health Authority. The Oregon Health Authority's power, we're talking about power, has to be completely reined in. And I think
100%.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about eliminating it altogether, because there are some roles for public health,
Right.
And that are much more benign than what it's been used for, but certainly decreased in size and volume, and absolutely their power will be taken from them.
I mean, can we at least get experts?
Yeah,
in
that's
those
the
positions?
thing. That's exactly.
We got bow tie guy with Dean Seidlinger, and then you have Pat Allen,
who has none, no expertise at all, none, zero.
I mean,
I have more than he does.
So I'm like, can we at least get? And it's tragic because, the public health system, it's supposed to be meant for good, and we're supposed to trust in that. It's supposed to be there working for us,
Right.
And the way that Brown and all the Democrats across the nation kind of they poisoned that. They poisoned that outlook.
Yes.
We lost confidence in our health system. We lost confidence in the CDC. We lost confidence in institutions that are supposed to be good.
I can't think of very many institutions left that I have any confidence in. I don't have any confidence left in the FBI. Do you?
You tell me. I mean,
I have none left in the FBI.
Yeah.
And
they probably have a bug in this studio right now.
Yeah, I don't have any
left.
confidence in the CIA. I don't have any confidence
And that's
in
so
the OH.
tragic. That's so tragic.
But it is. I'll tell you, though, when you have Democrat governors for 40 years and they keep having to try to find people off the backbench, you end up, like you said, with people in these director positions that have no expertise. My favorite example, it's almost like it's moved into where they have negative expertise. My favorite example is the Oregon Department of Transportation. I in my spare time preparing for this, I've been kind of rolling through all the departments and all and looking. So I thought, I'm going to see who we have at the helm of the Oregon Department of Transportation, handling billions of dollars of our tax money, right? And it's the fellow that they chose. Do you remember back when we wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on a bridge that didn't happen?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so the guy over in Washington, on the Washington side of that project, that absolute unmitigated fiasco, after it was over, Oregon decided he would be a really good person to put in charge of our Department of Transportation. That's who we have at the helm. The guy that ran that project into the ground on the Washington side.
Yeah.
So
that's fitting for
fitting.
Yeah, that's fitting for the direction Oregon's been going in over the past couple decades. But
Right.
Let's talk about taxes now. If you're listening right now and you're like, oh gosh, taxes, here we go. Let me just tell you something, okay?
It's going to be short and sweet.
It's going to be short and sweet, but let me just tell you something. You need to care about taxes because Oregon, in particular, the Portland area, but Oregon as a whole is not very business friendly. There's unnecessary taxes that businesses are dealing with. In fact, I have a friend that wants to bring a gym here, but he's kind of waiting on this election.
Good.
Because he's like, I'm sorry, I just can't bring one of my gyms there because it's not business friendly, let alone where he wants to put it in Portland, where not only you have to deal with high taxes, but you have to deal with crime. You have to deal with, basically bowing down to Antifa.
Right.
If the Antifa doesn't like you, good luck, running your business. So taxes, what are your take on taxes? What taxes would you eliminate? And what would that look? What would taxes look like under a Barton administration?
Well, I think we have to be realistic in terms of what the legislature is going to look like that I'll be dealing with in my first 2 years. And remember, I'll have two separate shots at this: the first two and the last two, and then hopefully another 4. But I'm going to state categorically right off the bat that in my first 4 years in office, there will be no new regulations that I will sign. None. And no new taxes, because we have a lot of catching up to do. We have a lot of slimming down of government to do. So I do not anticipate that we will need to pass any new taxes, so I'm willing to commit to not signing any new taxes, regulations, or fees going forward. And because working families and businesses, they all feel like you just described, that we have a hostile attitude towards business from government.
Especially small business.
Yeah, especially
100%.
and the agencies. There's this kind of gotcha mentality where they're looking to find businesses doing things wrong rather than helping them do things right. Now, I've heard some exceptions. I've heard people say, no, this particular department is doing a pretty good job of outreach. But in general, there's no denying the state of Oregon has a national and international reputation for being hostile to business.
Yeah.
And the best example is the fact that Intel took its most recent expansion to Ohio. And it was basically surrounding these problems.
Right.
But how many businesses have fled the state? Countless. So,
and I'm sure they blame that on the pandemic or whatever, not because of Brown's leadership or the non-friendly environment for businesses around here. But
they won't state it out loud, but we all know why they're gone. But the one I would want to mention, if I could get a tax repealed immediately, it would be the cat tax, and that's going to need help from a Republican legislature. So we have to elect Republican legislators, Republican senators, and it's possible. It's possible with this red wave coming and what these numbers that you're seeing on that poll show, it's possible that I would have majorities. And if I did, that would be my number one tax to repeal would be the cat tax. But then this is what I would do as governor. I'm going to listen to business. I'm not going to presume like Kate Brown does that she knows everything. I'm going to listen to business. I'm going to go to small businesses and large and say, I want to hear from you. Tell me, give me a list, top 1 to 10. Which ones go first? Which regulations have to go first to make it so that you can be more productive, so that you can grow your business, so you can hire more employees, get more people put to work, and then we will start down that list. One at a time.
That's what I like
Knock 'em out.
That's what I like about you. I think that you're going to be, just from following you and getting to know you a little bit in the short time here, and you came to church with us on Sunday.
I did.
That was great.
Fun. Yeah.
I feel like you will be that on the ground governor that will go to the people and say, what do you need? And that's really important. Our governor now doesn't do that. She likes to hide behind her. You can never catch her anywhere, and she likes to hide behind her people and behind her security team, and she doesn't talk to the people unless it's people that are super, super friendly to her.
Right.
She's not the people's governor, and that's kind of what I see in you a little bit. That's what I like about you. Speaking of the legislator, you mentioned the legislators. Great segue. I'm a person where I try my hardest not to speak, to follow Reagan's commandment about not speaking ill about Republicans. However, it's not, in my opinion, it's not speaking ill about Republicans when you simply point out their voting record. And there are some Republicans in the legislature, one that's running for governor, that has a very troubling voting record. I mean, these Republicans voted to change Columbus Day, change the name.
Right.
They voted to they voted to put feminine products in male restrooms in schools. They voted against Portland Police's ability to handle rioters by getting rid of special, munitions and tools that they used for crowd control. And so, I'm starting to think to myself, like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Are there any Republicans in the legislature besides Dallas Hurd and Baumgart, or who's the other, the chair, the current chair?
Bart Sugar?
Yes. Is there any other Republicans that have a backbone that are going to stand for our values? Because they're just not standing for our values. And I think Kevin Sterrett of Oregon Firearms Federation hits it on the head. And it's funny because Bill Post, an ex-legislator, I actually like Bill Post, was praising Kevin back in 2018 and how Kevin's not a one-issue guy. He's a lot bigger than the gun. He's a very big asset. And now he just came out and called him an old man, and he's crazy. He's going crazy because Kevin's been calling out some of this legislation that Republicans have been voting on. And so it just goes to show you that there is an establishment in Oregon, and it's
Sure.
So how are you gonna work with those guys? How are you gonna bring you and being an outsider, you call yourself an outsider.
I am an outsider.
How are you going to work with these establishment folk that may not have that respect for you like they would have for their colleagues that have they've worked with?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I shouldn't say if, when I win the governor's office, it's not going to be how am I going to work with them. It's going to be how are they going to work with me. It's about that simple. If they want anything passed, if they want something done, they're going to have to work with me. And I think the phone's going to be ringing my direction, not the other way when I take the office. Let me go back to the voting record because this will tell you a little bit about that. There is no question that there is an establishment candidate, and this is what we've been talking about the whole time. It's about power. It's about holding on to power. And the problem is that both sides of the power base in that legislature, none of them have been dealing with the public's problems.
Yeah, they're just happy to be in the club.
They just want to be in the club. They want to talk about the budget. They want to pass out the money. They don't solve problems. They don't, as you said so well, they do not stand up for us as the public, the people of Oregon. They haven't stood up for us. So I'm going to go back to with a couple of the things you mentioned to point this out. There's a big difference between. So I know the person you're talking about voted to actually the one that kills me the most is change the state song and put gender neutral words in the state song so that we didn't say men. That kind of thing drives me nuts. Yeah. So, but it's kind of silly and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, that's different. That's our values that you're messing with a little bit. So a much more important one to talk about, though, is when these police powers were mitigated.